The knock on the hotel room door came at the worst possible moment. Mark had his shirt half off. Adrian was laughing at something on the television, shoes already gone. The room, dim and warm and private, the way they always kept it on these weekends. Room 214, third floor, end of the corridor, far enough from the lobby that no one from Kumasi would ever walk past. That was what Mark had told himself. No one from Kumasi would ever be here. And then the knock. 3 hard raps. Then a voice. Pastor Mark. Pastor
Good
Mark
afternoon.
Osei,
I have the
is
documents
that
for the
you?
meeting.
I thought I saw you in the lobby. It is me, Brother Samuel from the finance committee. The room turned to ice. Mark did not breathe. Adrian sat up slowly, eyes wide, all the laughter gone from his face. Pastor Mark, Brother Samuel called again. The door is not fully closed. Sir, Mark moved faster than he had in years. He grabbed his shirt. He pressed the door shut silently with one hand before Samuel could push it open. He cleared his throat, straightened his collar, cracked the door open just 3 inches, just his face, just a silver, and looked out at the confused, sweaty face of Brother Samuel from the Grace Gospel Church Finance Committee. Samuel, Mark said, his voice pastor smooth, pastor calm. I didn't know you were in Accra. I came for my cousin's funeral, sir. Are you? Is everything okay? Are you alone? Resting. Mark said, long drive. Minister's gathering ended early. Just resting. Samuel nodded, satisfied. God bless you, Pastor. Sorry to disturb. I will see you on Sunday. God bless you, Samuel. He closed the door. He stood with his back against it, heart slamming against his ribs like it wanted out. Adrian stared at him from across the room. Neither of them spoke. Then Adrian said, very quietly, how long do you think you can keep doing this? Mark did not answer, but they both already knew. The clock was running. It had always been running. And on that night, in room 214 of a hotel in Accra, it began running faster. Pastor Mark Osei was the kind of man a city built its hope around. He was 38, tall, broad-shouldered, with a voice so smooth it could make a scripture feel like a song. He had built Grace Gospel Church in Kumasi from a rented room with 12 plastic chairs into a full standing building with 350 faithful members. He had done it in 6 years through genuine love, sharp preaching, and the kind of charisma that made strangers feel like family. His wife, Grace, was a school teacher, quiet, beautiful, steady as a wall. Their daughter, Lily, was 7 years old and already knew how to clap on beats during worship. Together, the 3 of them looked like the answer to every prayer a congregation could pray for the leader. People invited their relatives to Grace Gospel just to see Pastor Mark preach. Women who had lost faith came back to it through his sermons. Young men who had grown up hating church found themselves seated in the front row, Bibles in hand, because something about this man felt real. He counseled marriages. He sat at hospital bedsides. He remembered names. He was not performing. The love was genuine. That was what made everything that followed so complicated. Because Mark Osei was also carrying something no one in that church had ever been allowed to see. He had known since he was 19 that he was different. He had prayed against it for years. He had fasted, confessed, rebuked, and buried it so deep inside himself that for stretches of time he almost forgot it was there. He had married Grace at 26 because he loved her. And he did love her, truly, in the steady way a man loves the person who brings peace to his life. But peace and wholeness are not the same thing. So he had built a system, A careful, airtight, yes tested system. Every third weekend, when he announced a minister conference or a pastoral retreat, he drove 2 hours to Accra. He became Michael. He excelled. Nobody knew, not Grace, not Lily, not the elders, nobody except the man in room 214. And that man was becoming a problem. In Accra, Mark Osei did not exist. He was Michael, no surname, no title, no church. He wore plain clothes. He kept his cap low. He drove a car. He borrowed from a trusted friend in Accra who understood the life and asked no questions. The group he belonged to was small and careful, 8 men, sometimes 10. They gathered at a private apartment owned by Felix, a banker, with a large smile and enough money to keep things quiet. There were rules: no photos, no real names unless freely given, no bringing outsiders without agreement from everyone. For 4 years, Mark had kept these two lives perfectly sealed from each other, like two rooms in the house, connected by a door he never opened. Sunday to Friday, he was Pastor Mark. Friday night to Sunday morning, he was Michael. He told himself it was enough, that the arrangement worked, and that he was not hurting anyone. He was wrong, of course. He was hurting Grace in ways she could not yet name. He was building Lily's world on ground that was cracking underneath. He was teaching 350 people to trust a version of himself that was only partially true. But the heart is excellent at building excuses, and Mark's heart had had that for years. Then, one Friday in March, Felix opened the door, and there was a man on the couch that Mark had never seen before. Sharp eyes, slow smile, a glass of wine held loosely, calm the way only people who are confident or very dangerous tend to be. "This is Adrian," Felix said quietly in the kitchen afterward. "He's from Lagos. I trust him." Mark studied the room. He studied the man. Adrian looked up and caught his eye without flinching. Not aggressive, not shy, just present, fully uncomfortably present in the way that some people are. They barely spoke that night. But on the drive back to Kumasi, just before sunrise, Mark realized that he had thought about Adrian 3 separate times during the 2 hour journey. He turned up the radio. He told himself it was nothing. He had told himself that before. 2 weeks after that night, Felix shared Mark's number with Adrian without asking. The first message arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Mark was between counseling sessions, sitting at his office with a cup of cold tea. "Felix says you are from Kumasi. I'll be there for work next month. Adrian." Mark read it twice, put the phone down, picked it up again, typed. Small word. That was how it started. 2 words. They texted slowly at first, carefully, the way men in their situation always began. Neutral topics: football, music, the traffic in Lagos versus the traffic in Accra. Adrian was sharp and funny. He never pushed. He never asked personal questions before Mark was ready to give them. He seemed to understand instinctively where the walls were, and he did not throw himself against them. That made him more dangerous than someone who would have. By the time Adrian arrived in Kumasi for his work trip, they had been texting for 3 weeks, and Mark had read their thread more time than he would ever admit to himself. They met at a small coffee spot outside the city. Mark wore a cap and sunglasses and sat with his back to the door like a man who had done this before. Adrian arrived in a plain shirt, ordered coffee, and sat down without making it awkward. They talked for nearly 3 hours. On the drive home, Mark rolled down the window and let the warm evening air fill the car. He felt something he had not felt in a long time. Light, as if someone had quietly removed a weight from his chest while he wasn't paying attention. He knew what that feeling meant. He had felt pieces of it before, but never this clearly. He also knew it was the most dangerous thing he had felt in years. He prayed about it when he got home. He asked God to remove it. He sat in the living room while Grace and Lily slept, and he asked sincerely for the feeling to go away. It did not go away. Sunday, he preached on the faithfulness of God, and the church rose to its feet. Three people gave their lives to Christ. An elder told him it was the best sermon of the year. Mark shook hands, smiled, and went home to the feeling that refused to leave. Grace Osei was not a suspicious woman by nature. She was not the kind of wife who checked phones or demanded explanations for every late return. She believed in trust. She had given Mark her trust freely for 9 years, but she was observant. She had always been observant. It was the teacher in her. She noticed the small things. She noticed, for instance, that Mark had begun carrying his phone differently. He had always left it on tables, counters, the bathroom shelf. Now it was in his pocket or his hands, always closed, always face down when he set it down. She noticed that he had become lighter in the past month, more cheerful, more distracted in a dreaming way, the way a person gets when they are thinking about something pleasant that has nothing to do with the room they are standing in. She noticed he had started going to bed later. She would wake at midnight and hear him still in the living room, not watching television, just sitting. She could see the glow of a phone screen under the door. She told herself it could be many things: stress, a new sermon series he was excited about, perhaps a new friendship with another minister. She gave it every good explanation she could find. But Grace had grown up watching her mother ignore signs. She had promised herself at 17 that she would never be that woman, the one who sees and pretends not to see until it is too late. So she watched, quietly, carefully, without showing her hand. At church, she sat in the front row, smiled at her husband's sermon the way she always had. She organized the women's fellowship meetings. She brought Lily to Sunday school. She laughed at the right moment during after service lunch with the elders. She was a good pastor's wife. She had always been a good pastor's wife. But behind the smile, behind the hymn books and the handshakes and the neat Sunday dress, Grace was watching her husband very carefully, and slowly the picture she was building was not one she recognized. 4 months in, the arrangement began to shift. It started gently, the way most dangerous things start. Adrian began calling instead of texting. At first, only occasionally, then regularly, then every other day. His voice was steady and warm, and Mark found himself looking forward to it in a way he could not justify. Then, Adrian began appearing in Kumasi more often than his work schedule required. One visit became two, two became three. He never came to the church. He was careful about that. But one afternoon, he drove slowly past the building and mentioned it to Mark later with a smile. "Nice place," he said. "Big." Mark felt cold when he heard that. "You cannot come near the church," he said firmly. "Not ever. Do you understand that?" "Relax," Adrian said. "I was just passing." "Adrian," I said, "relax," still smiling. But something in the smile had edges now. They argued for the first time that evening. Mark said Adrian was getting careless. Adrian said Mark was getting comfortable with everything while giving nothing. The argument went in circles. Mark drove home frustrated, but he called Adrian the next morning. That was the real mistake. Not the argument, the call the next morning. Because he told Adrian something Mark had not meant to reveal, that even when he was angry, he could not stay away. Adrian filed that information somewhere quiet and said nothing about it. 2 weeks later, he said what he had been building toward for months. "I want more than this, Mark. More than hidden weekends and borrowed time. I want you to at least be honest with yourself about what this is." "I know what this is," Mark said. "Then say it." Silence. "Say what this is," Adrian repeated, out loud, just to me. Mark said nothing, and in that silence, Something unlocked between them, something heavy and irreversible, because Adrian heard the silence and understood it as agreement, as confirmation, and he began, slowly and carefully, to use it. Mark was walking to his car after a midweek Bible study when the message came. The parking lot was empty. The church lights were off. It was a peaceful, ordinary Tuesday night. Cricket, distant traffic, the smell of dust, and evening rain. He had just preached on integrity, and the congregation had responded with genuine emotion. A young man had wept at the altar. It had been a good night. His phone buzzed. I have been thinking. I think the church should know who their pastor really is. Adrian. Mark stood completely still in the dark parking lot. He called immediately. Adrian picked it up on the first ring, which meant he had been waiting. What is this? Mark's voice was low and even. He had trained himself for years to sound calm in crisis. I told you, Adrian said. I am tired. I am tired of being the secret. You have a whole world, a church, a wife, a daughter, a title, a future. What do I have? Weekend you can spare? We agreed on how this worked. You agreed. I accepted. There is a difference. Adrian, if you do this, I have photos, Mark. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Not from hotels, just the two of us. Enough for people to ask questions. I have messages. I have enough. The call ended. Mark did not move for a long time. A motorbike passed on the road outside the church fence. A dog barked somewhere far away. The night continued as if nothing had happened. He got into his car. He sat in the dark. He had counseled men in crisis. He had sat across from people whose lives were collapsing, and he had handed them hope with steady hands. He knew what to say when a world was ending. Yet, he had no words for himself. He started the engine. He drove home. Grace had left a plate of food on the table, covered with her clothes. Yet, he could not eat. Mark drove to Accra on a Wednesday, something he had never done outside of his scheduled weekends. He told Grace he had an urgent meeting with a ministry partner. She nodded and packed him a bottle of water for the road. He met Adrian at a small restaurant outside the city. He had an envelope in his jacket pocket. He was ashamed of it before he even placed it on the table. Adrian looked at it. He did not touch it. What is that? He said. Mark said nothing. Adrian pushed the envelopes back slowly. Pick that up, he said, before I get angry. Adrian, pick it up, Mark, his voice angrier. But the edges were fully out now. I am not one of your church members that you can settle with an offering. Mark put the envelope back in his pocket. He felt smaller than he had felt in a long time. Then, tell me what you want, he said clearly. Tell me clearly. I want you to stop pretending, Adrian said. I want you to look at your life and be honest. I am not asking you to destroy your family. I am not asking you to stand on a pulpit and make an announcement. I am asking you to decide who you are and then live as that person, fully, even if quietly. And if I can't, then end this completely. Delete my number. Never come to Accra again. Never contact me. Can you do that? The restaurant was filling up with crowd. Plates arrived at other tables. A woman at the corner booth laughed loudly at something at her phone. Mark thought about the drive home, about Grace's warm food left on the table, about Lily's voice leading worship on Sunday's morning. He thought about it all, and he could not make himself say yes to ending it. Adrian watched him and got his answer. That is what I thought of. He said quietly. He stood, paid for his drink, and left. Mark drove back to Kumasi in silence, having fixed absolutely nothing. What do you think should happen next? Should Mark succumb to Adrian's request, or should he end it totally? Let me know in the comment section. Also, do it to subscribe, like and share, because there is going to be a next part and you don't want to miss it.